So welcome everyone to our Careers in Sports networking event. We really wish we could be doing this in person, but we're going to make the best of it here over Zoom, just like everybody's been doing for the past year. So we are super excited tonight to have a half dozen industry professionals with us from various parts and various jobs within the sports industry. So what we're going to do is we're going to have sort of a brief Q&A session with our panelists. So students, if you're on the call, you can just kind of listen in. We have some questions that I prepared that we've just, kind of cobbled together. And then after that, we will do networking. Depending on how long the first part of our Q&A goes, we may allow some time just for open Q&A here, but then we really want to leave a lot of time for networking. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to utilize Zoom's breakout rooms. And I will set it up where you can choose which breakout room you want to go into. So I'll just have the breakout rooms labeled with each of our industry professionals' names. So students, when we open the breakout room, you could just jump into whichever room you would want to go to connect with that professional. And then I believe you'll be able to go from room to room, or at least come back to this main room and go into a different room. So don't feel that you have to stay in that one breakout room the whole time. You can kind of bounce around and connect with different people, just like if this would be an in-person networking event where you can connect with multiple of the professionals in the room. So hopefully that all makes sense, and hopefully it works with me, kind of pulling the levers behind the scenes trying to get that to work, but we'll make it work. So to get started, of course, we want to let our panelists introduce themselves and maybe just very briefly describe where they work and then what they do with their organization. So to make this easier, I'm just going to go in the order they're on my screen, at least to let them introduce themselves so everybody's not kind of wondering when to jump in. So again, panelists, if you could just introduce yourselves and then tell us where you work and just briefly what you do. And I'm going to start with Erica.
Awesome. Thanks, Randy. Hi, everyone. My name is Erica Cornell. I'm the events specialist at the Greater Columbus Sports Commission. So to kind of give you a background of what the Sports Commission is, we primarily focus on sports tourism. So our sister company is Experience Columbus. And what we do is we bid on events, championships, sporting events to come to the city of Columbus. So a great example is the NCAA Women's Final Four that we held a few years ago. We bid on NCAA events. We bid on US Olympic events, so like USA fencing, USA volleyball. And what we really try to do is bring those sporting events to the city of Columbus, which basically increases hotel room nights and increases our economic impact for the city. So trying to bring the sporting events to help build the, economy through tourism of sports. And I am specifically the event specialist. So once those events come to the city, I help either on the hospitality side and supporting those events, or helping with like event operations or on site at the sporting events. That's the gist of what I do.
Great. Thanks, Erica. Dan, you want to go next?
Hey, everyone. I'm Dan Hope. I'm the senior reporter for 11 Warriors, where I cover Ohio State football, basketball, whatever. So, if you guys aren't familiar, 11 Warriors is a website. We cover all things Ohio State, and I've been there for about 4 years now, as primarily covering football, helping out a little bit with basketball and whatever else might come up.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Brandon?
Hey, everyone. My name is Brandon Beam. I work for 97.1 The Fan, which is a sports radio station, if you didn't know, right here in Columbus. I host a morning show with former Buckeye athlete and actually professor now, so one of you might be in his classes, Bobby Carpenter, and we basically talk sports every single morning from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. I know for a fact that I would not have listened to that in college because I was not up before 10 a.m. So that would not be something that would interest me. But as you get older, you learn to like to get up and do things. So I host a morning show on 97.1 The Fan, which is the flagship for Ohio State, the Columbus Blue Jackets, and your 2020 MLS Cup champs, Columbus Crew. So that's what I do.
Perfect. Thanks, Brandon. Katie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Krall. I'm a baseball operations analyst for the Cincinnati Reds. So if you've seen or read Moneyball, that's pretty much my job. I help with roster construction, I write scouting reports, and make sure that our players have everything they need to succeed in the field. I also oversee entry-level hiring for the Reds, and we've been really intentional with building a relationship with Ohio State. So I see a lot of familiar faces on the call, which is awesome, and looking forward to meeting you guys more later.
Perfect. All right, we'll go from the National League to the American League. Eric, you're next.
Well, thank you very much for having me. My name is Eric Handler, and I'm the Vice President of Communications with the YES Network. And for those in the Midwest, the YES Network is a regional sports network based in New York City, and we televise the Yankees, Brooklyn Nets, New York City Football Club, and New York Liberty of the WNBA. And I guess to put it into, to frame it, it'd be similar to Fox Sports Ohio and Sport Time Ohio. And I've been with the YES Network for 16 years. I handle all internal and external communications, working with the media, both legacy and new media. And my Ohio State ties are my mother went to Ohio State, and 2 years ago, I took my son to the Horseshoe for the first time when we saw Ohio State do a number on Penn State, and had a wonderful time.
Nice, that's great. And then finally, Rachel.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. My name is Rachel. I'm with the PGA Tour, which is the Professional Golfers Association. I'm in membership and sales with the tour, and it's been a busy week. As some of you might know, if you follow golf, we have the Players Championship here at our PGA Tour headquarters at TPC Sawgrass. So it's been a little crazy. Definitely very different from how far we've come a year ago, because this time a year ago, we were actually shutting down the Players Championship and canceling all of our tour events. So it's very bittersweet, but we're really excited to be back, and it's going to be a great week for us here at Sawgrass. And yeah, I'm in membership and sales with the tour. Been for the tour for about 3 years now. Graduated from Ohio State back in 2017, so been out of school for almost 4 years already. And I love golf. I'm a big golfer, so I'm really happy to be here today to connect with you and to hear from the other panelists as well.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate that. So the first question that I have, and this could be for any of the panelists, so feel free to jump in. When you were in school, when you were in college, did you have an interest in working in sports at that time? And if so, what did you do to prepare yourself to work within the sports industry while you were in college?
I can jump in. I absolutely did. I was a huge sports fan from the time I was a kid. So I always knew that I wanted to do something in sports. And I would say, around like middle school, high school was when I kind of figured out that I was good at writing and I enjoyed writing. So I knew, from before I even started at Ohio State, that my plan was to be a sports writer, sports journalist. So I think literally my first or second day on campus, I went to the Lantern office and was like, hey, can I start writing for the Lantern, which is, most of you are probably familiar with, the student newspaper, just so that I could start getting experience while I was there. And I wrote for the Lantern for 3 years, my first 3 years of school. And then I also did some other stuff as well. I wrote for Bleacher Report while I was in college, and I did stuff for them, and I did some, other stuff on the side as well. And, I think that was really important for me, because I knew, if I wanted to have a, opportunity once I got out of school to, be able to get a job and be able to get employed quickly, but I was going to need to have experience on my resume. So, that was a really big thing for me, was making sure, as soon as I started in college, even before it a little bit, but just to make sure that I, started building that experience, got as much experience as I could. And I mean, honestly, I picked Ohio State largely for that reason, because I knew, it's one of the biggest sports schools in the country, to have the opportunity to get experience writing about Ohio State, reporting on Ohio State sports, because, there's such a national audience for it. But I knew that going to, Ohio State would give me those opportunities to kind of be around something that there were a lot of eyeballs on.
Yeah, I'll go next. So I know Dan very well. Dan and I did radio together at Ohio State at Scarlet and Gray Sports Radio, which some of you might still be in. Dan took the high route, and he went to journalism, which is way more professional than radio is. And so I just stayed in radio. But yeah, I was kind of with Dan. I knew I wanted to be in sports for a long time. I was never good enough to play them, as you can tell by looking at me. So I figured, I may as well just be able to talk about them. So yeah, I was real weird. Like growing up, I would mute like the NCAA football games on my TV. And I would like broadcast them like I was Paul Keels, and my parents would think like I was an absolute maniac. And luckily, my high school had a radio program there. I got involved in that and started calling high school football games when I was a junior and senior, and then went to Western Kentucky for a semester, hated it, transferred up here to Ohio State. And then, got involved with the student radio program at Ohio State, calling baseball games, volleyball games, women's, men's soccer, lacrosse, really anything that you could kind of do to just get the experience. And, luckily enough, got to do my senior year, got to do football. It was super, super cool about that. And so, yeah, I've known that I've wanted to do that for a long time as well. And lucky enough, I got an internship at the Fan, and I still work there. So yeah, for a long time, I've wanted to do sports, and I'm lucky to be where I'm at.
I think Dan and Brandon did. Oh, go ahead, Eric.
I want to just distance myself from Dan because I was hearing his story and it mirrors my story, which is, I grew up in a very sports oriented family and I loved writing. I thought I was good at it and I enjoyed it. And I went to Gettysburg College in rural Pennsylvania, and it's a small liberal arts school. And the summer heading into my sophomore year, I had this epiphany that I wanted to do sports PR work or sports information work. And the reasoning was I loved writing and I loved sports. And I always tell my interns, make a list of things you're good at and a list of things you enjoy doing, and find a vocation that marries you to. And in this case, it was sports information or sports PR. So the next 3 years of college, I wrote for the school newspaper. I had some good internships, and again, it was just luck that I knew what I wanted to do. I wasn't a genius or anything, but knowing what I wanted to do early on in my college career enabled me to sort of set the course over the next 3 years, and I was able to gather the experience outside the classroom that ultimately helped me land a first job and work my way up through the ranks.
I'll go ahead and speak. I was very involved in sports growing up as a kid, played, everything from soccer to softball to golf. And I got involved in golf towards my last few years of high school. I took a break from soccer because I knew I wasn't going to play in college. And like Brandon said, just knew I wasn't good enough to go D1. So I ended up taking golf, and I played golf growing up with my dad, rode in the cart with him, and then started playing with him. And I realized that, going into college, I wanted to work in sports, didn't know exactly what I was going to do. But I knew I wanted to be in the sports industry, and to do that, I knew I wanted to go to Ohio State just because, it's like Brandon and Eric were saying, it's one of the schools where they're, solely focused on athletics. It's a big, big school where, they have the greatest football team ever. And I just knew that I wanted to work in sports, and I knew it was going to be hard being a female in this industry, but I just did whatever I could to get out there and to volunteer. And that's what I started doing in Columbus. Actually, I volunteered at the Memorial, which is in Dublin at Murfield Village, that golf tournament. And then I did the Nationwide Children's Hospital for the Scarlet and Gray course, which is now for the Corn Ferry Tour. Back then it was the Web.com Tour. And then I ended up volunteering at the Players actually when I was in school, because that was right after school back when it was in May. Now it's in March, but ended up making connections, and that's how I got into the tour. So you never know, honestly. You should go out there and just get involved as much as you can. Volunteering at any sporting event, they really do need those. And if you're willing to help, they will help you, honestly. And it was just always a dream of mine actually to work for the PGA Tour, and now here I am. My dreams are coming true, and it's really possible for anyone. You just got to put yourself there and put your best foot forward, and people are willing to help you.
I'll add my story, which was a little bit different. So unlike everyone, I did not go into college thinking I was going to work in sports. I've always loved sports, did them growing up, just like Rachel was saying. But I actually started out as pre-exercise science, thinking I wanted to do physical therapy, actually for athletes. But like many of you will find out, sometimes science is not your strong suit. But it just so happened that a lot of my classes overlapped with the sport and leisure studies major at the time, which is now sport industry. And I kind of really found myself enjoying those classes. I was working at the RPAC, which is our recreational facility at Ohio State that many of you know about. And so I was working in recreational sports, and even found myself participating in student organizations that were involved around sports. So I was in sportsmanship council. So I kind of just naturally started gravitating towards the sport industry. Didn't know for sure what I wanted to do, but I switched my major. And with that major, it requires internships, experiences. So that's kind of how I slowly found my path, ended up going to grad school. And during grad school, I had an internship with the Nationwide Children's Columbus Marathon, and absolutely fell in love with sporting events. And it just slowly transitioned into doing events. And then I found myself at the Greater Columbus Sports Commission. So a little bit of a different trajectory, but kind of like Eric was saying, you find something that you enjoy and you kind of see yourself going into that path. So I would just say, find something that you enjoy doing and kind of like see where it takes you as well.
I really love how you phrase that, Erica. For me, I was a history major at Northwestern, and I knew that studying the fall of the Roman Empire wouldn't be directly related to working in baseball. So I would have to find ways to gain experience in sports. So I planned the World Series Trophy Tour for the Cubs in 2016. I worked as an assistant GM on the Cape Cod Baseball League. So I think you can probably tell by now, like a lot of commonalities in these stories is you have to be very proactive if you do want to work in sports. And even if you're not compensated for that experience, like Rachel said, you do need it on your resume because the talent level is so high for people who want to work in this industry.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those stories. And it really, I think, dovetails into my next question. I know a lot of our professionals, our panelists are, in positions where they are looking at resumes, are interviewing, hiring students for internships or entry-level opportunities. For those of you that are on our panel that are in that position, what is it that you're looking for on students' resumes? What sort of skills, or maybe even like a mindset from students when they come into interviews that really sort of piques your interest?
I will say, since I help oversee the internship program at the Sports Commission, a lot of it is experience. We just like to see that you've gotten your feet wet, that you're trying new things, whether it's paid or not paid. I think any exposure to a sporting organization doesn't always have to be in sports, but it's just you're getting experience outside of your classes. And then it's understanding how are those skills you're learning and maybe your job, your internships are transferable to what we're asking of our interns, which a lot of it can be administrative work. Sometimes it's long hours since we're in events, but a lot of times it's just trying to gain professional experience. I would say a focus is great in sports or hospitality based on the industry we're in. But mainly you're just trying to grow yourself professionally and you're gaining those experiences and skills, whether it's working on a team or working in an office setting. You are just getting experience outside of your classwork is what I would recommend.
In addition to the experience that Erica mentioned, I would say we look for technical skills for our baseball operations and analytics roles. I think those have become like pretty commonly expected. So whether that's R, SQL, or Python, the ability to manipulate and pull out data, I would say you can gain a lot of that experience even if you don't take courses on that. I think there are awesome videos online and classes. So I would definitely recommend that if you're looking more towards the operations side of the game.
And I'll just add, we just have interns. Unfortunately, I don't have anybody full-time under me, but when I look at students to hire and everything, I think about, people who are curious, inquisitive, resourceful, people who don't need to be told things twice, people who are creative. there's a passion for, there's a genuine interest or passion for public relations. And also, I'm sure others, can speak to this as well, is because we're the Yankees and the Nets and everything, a lot of times when I get resumes and cover letters, the very first thing they say is, my family has been Yankees fans since 1950, which is fine, but it really doesn't move me at all. What I'm looking for is, while it's great to have somebody who knows baseball, the business of baseball and so forth, it's more important to find somebody who has a passion for the field and the industry and the discipline. Because I know I'm going to get somebody who's going to be hungry, who's going to dive into things, who has a manageable ego, and so forth. And those are the types of people I look for.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, like I know when we get like resumes for interns and stuff, a lot of times I look them over, and like a lot of times like the first thing on a resume or the first thing on a cover letter will be, I'm a big Ohio State sports fan. I love the Buckeyes, but I know like for me, if I'm looking at the resume, I want to see, do you have skills that are going to translate to this? And like, especially like for like, if you're working for 11 Words, if you want to be a writer, I want to see your writing samples. Like I want you to submit examples of your writing. And that's what I'm going to be looking at primarily is, can you write and do you have any experience doing it? And not so much about, how much do you love Ohio State? Because doesn't really matter. It just matters if do you know what you're going to be doing, and do you have the skills that are going to translate to actually doing the job or the internship, whatever it is you're being asked to do.
I'll piggyback off Dan. First of all, they don't make me in charge of anything at the radio station, so they don't even trust me for a second with that. But yeah, I mean, if you want to get into like audio-based, I guess mediums, like, a lot of people starting podcasts, like it's not that expensive to, hook a microphone up to your, computer and just record yourself doing anything, like watch a Blue Jackets game and act like you're Bob McElligott or, Jody Shelley or Jeff Rimmer, and like, just do something like that. So even though I have no say in any of that, I think, what these people are saying is that, try to put yourself in the best situation that you possibly can. And it doesn't necessarily matter your sports fandom if you're looking to get into something professionally, because, if you are putting yourself out there and doing that job, then at the end of the day, that really doesn't matter.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, I'm not in a recruiting role, but I like Erica, I did work at the RPAC actually too in school, and I was in member services. So I worked with the full-time member services coordinator at the time, and we did a lot of like recruiting together, and we would hire and go through applications for hiring students who wanted to work at the RPAC. So what I would notice too when interviewing them, if they're asking questions or if they're just sitting there and being quiet, because if they're not asking questions, it doesn't really show you're even interested or that you even want to be here. So what I've noticed that asking really good questions just draws an interest for the hiring manager. And also, like I said before, if you do have that time, even in the summer to try and volunteer a little bit, to me, I've noticed that it really does make a difference for the resume. Just putting in the extra time, showing that this is what you're passionate about and this is what you love doing, and you're willing to volunteer your time to do something that you truly believe in. And I've noticed that works well too. But definitely communicating as well, just following up, asking those questions. They love, hearing that. And you just want to make sure too that you're showing them that you're passionate and that you do want to be here. And it can be a little, rough sometimes being on the spot, but just having that open communication with them, I've noticed works really well.
Yeah, that's certainly great perspective. And Eric and Dan, you had mentioned about, people coming in and just saying they're huge fans of the teams that you represent. And, that's not really the best tact to use. And, I've been doing this, events similar to these for many years now, and that comes up almost every time. And I think it's sometimes surprising for the students because they think that's the foot in the door. Just loving Team X is going to, lead them to the internship or entry level job. So I'm glad that came up again tonight. So the next question I have is one that, probably a lot of people are asking right now. So this past year, obviously COVID has thrown a monkey wrench into everything, and has made what we do very difficult. So I'm just curious how your job specifically, or your organization's, your organization's job has been affected by COVID. And now that we're maybe towards, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, what do you think things will look like here, maybe in summer or fall for your organization?
I could jump in and say, I think like for me, in some ways it changed a lot, and in some ways it didn't. Like for me, for example, like I was already working from home for the most part beforehand, so like it didn't change too much in that regard. But obviously, like last year, like when it looked like there wasn't going to be an Ohio State football season, like that was pretty challenging. Like when the season was initially canceled in August or whatever, I think it was, like if there was a month there until they reinstated the season, where we're thinking, what in the world are we going to write about for this whole fall when there's no season? So, we had to be really creative about coming up with like different ideas of like things we were going to do. And, I think the biggest thing is you had to be really, really adaptable, because things changed on the fly. I mean, there were games, there was one, for example, I think it was the Ohio State at Illinois game. I had driven to Champaign, Illinois for the game. I had been there for like an hour and then found out the game was being canceled and I was driving back the next day. Like that was just part of a deal in the COVID world. But, I think, projecting forward to like how it's changed things, like, I think I'm going to be really interested to see like, how maybe we use some of these different tools like Zoom, for example. We weren't using Zoom a year ago. Now, every press conference has been on Zoom for a year, and it's something that, we use regularly. So I'm really interested to see like how we can continue to utilize some of the things we've learned over the past year going forward. I think there's a lot of things we would like to see go back to the way they were, but I think there's also things that we've probably learned just about how to do our jobs in a different way that are going to continue to be useful going forward, even when the pandemic's over and things are more normal again.
I'll go ahead and jump in. I don't even know where to begin with the tour and the pandemic and COVID. As I said, when I hopped on here this time last year, the tour was pretty much getting shut down. We were the last sport pretty much to call it off and to stop our Players Championship, which is our Super Bowl with the PGA Tour. It's here at our headquarters, so it really does mean a lot to us. So the fact that we had to cancel it was just a huge bummer, but they did, our commissioner made the right decision, and we were the last sport to put things on pause. And then we were the first sport to pick things back up back in June of last year. So we've been having all of our events ever since, which has been great. With having the players again this week, it's been exciting around here in town. But I do remember there was a period of time last year where I was worried. I knew people that worked for the tour that got let go due to the pandemic. The tour is a nonprofit, so we do give a lot of the winnings back to charities, local charities. That's what the tour is all about, is giving those earnings back. And it was a rough time. I had made friends and they were getting let go. Those difficult decisions, and even in order to keep the organization going and to do everything we could for the players, especially at that time. So things have been getting better. We've had our events, they're starting, and they've been starting since June. It's been almost a year now since we've had our events back. But like Dan was saying, you just have to be adaptable. We've been working from home since the players got canceled last year. So I've been working from home for remote for a year, and we actually just got a brand new headquarters. We were all separate in different buildings. Now we're going to be going back into one big building, but we haven't been able to go in yet because, it's a density thing, right? So they're going to revisit that after players, but we're all finally looking forward to being under one roof together. And it's going to be different. It's going to be going from being spread out to going remote to being all together, under one building. And we're really excited, but it's going to be different. It'll take time to get used to, because everyone's been working from home now. Everyone's adapted to it. Everyone has their schedules that they have. And then when we all go back, it's going to be different. But I know I'm really looking forward to it and meeting new people, especially with the tour, because we are a big organization and we all have been spread out. So it's been harder, I would say, to network within my organization with the tour, just being remote, having to do the meetings. If you can, it's quite not the same as being in person, like I know you all know. But like, yeah, Dan said, you just have to be adaptable and you just have to stay positive. It can get hard too, but you just have to be happy and be thankful you still have a job, and to, work with an organization that is so passionate about what they do for the communities, for the charities, for the players. They are our first and foremost main priority, keeping them happy, doing whatever we can to keep them safe. So when it did get canceled last year, we were all pretty bummed, but we knew it was, it was for them and to keep them safe. So it's been good. It's been crazy. It's probably been the craziest year, I'm sure, like all of you have ever had working in sports. I mean, I never thought I would see anything like this, especially in the early stages of my career. So it's been quite a ride, and I'm really happy that our tournament is back this week. So everything is going well so far. Definitely different though. We have limited fans, which is kind of nice. It's not as packed at the tournament, but you have to wear the mask, have to sanitize. So yeah, it's different to see how, our team out there on the field is adapting to the course and things like that. And it's been a learning experience for sure.
I'll echo what Dan and Rachel just said. So again, I mean, I work in radio, and the biggest listenership of radio comes from people driving to work, to or from in their cars, and everybody was working from home. So it started the process of like, all right, well, how do we reach people at home, right? I mean, if they're sitting there working at home, like, what is our audience going to be? How are they going to listen? Like, our ratings were not great. Sports radio station with no sports going on, like that was not the best time this past summer. But our engineers, like they said, we've been working from home. I think today was the 1-year anniversary of like when Rudy Gobert touched all those microphones and then swiftly tested positive for coronavirus and everything got shut down. So since that happened, I've got like a studio in my house now. They supplied me with like a microphone and a board and everything. And so all of our employees who are like on-air hosts are actually working from home. So we haven't even done a show at the station face-to-face for over a year. So like we've all been in different locations. So like my co-host and I, he's at his house, I'm at my house. Our producer goes into the building and operates the board. But yeah, it was a massive challenge, especially last summer. I was working the 6 to 8 p.m. shift, and it was a show called The Buckeye Show. And it's a show that is, co-sponsored by IMG. So all of the content has to be Ohio State related. And so, it's like, well, there's nothing going on. What are we going to talk about? And so I think we just made up a bunch of segments to like, all right, yeah, tonight we're going to talk about Jesse Owens, or like, we're going to talk about, this Ohio State great. And you have to find ways to be creative because people are in their routines. And even if they're at home, sometimes they look forward to, just listening to what you have to say or anything like that. So it's been a mega challenge for us. Our engineers have knocked it out of the park. They've done an unbelievable job of everybody being at separate locations. We haven't had that many technical difficulties, which is pretty amazing for live radio. But moving forward, I think it's, that kind of a big challenge, I think, for everyone here, right? Is like, is there going to be the same appetite pre-COVID, post, like, when we all get through this as it was before? Some people kind of lost that luster. So as people start going back to work and getting back in the car, is there going to be that same hunger? Or if it's been gone for a year, like, have they kind of forgot about it, got into a routine, and it's not necessarily that important for them anymore? So that's the challenge, I think, now, especially for us in, like radio business, is, if people tune to music or whatever, or have found different podcasts that they listen to on their drive into work, what's that challenge going to be? So I think that's a main challenge for us moving forward. But like, Dan said, some of the technology that's come out has been great. Like, I wouldn't imagine we're going to send people to post-game press conferences anymore. That can all be done in the studio via Zoom. So I think the innovation coming out of it is actually pretty fascinating and pretty cool. But the results to get there has sucked, like, no doubt. The past year has been horrible. But yeah, it's been a pretty wild 12 months. But yeah, we've all been working from home, and I can't say I hate it now, because doing the 6 a.m. shift, like getting up and driving into work at 4 o'clock, like, doesn't sound too fun. And like rolling out of bed at 4:30 and then turning on a microphone at 6, like, it's much better. But I am looking forward to going back in the studio. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I'll just add to what everyone's been saying. Being on the sporting event side, we didn't have a whole lot to do. March, April, May. We got lucky that DeWine did allow outdoor sporting events. So that actually was a saving grace for us. Just even with hotel room nights and even having like youth events coming to the local sports parks was just, it was awesome just to even have that. And it's definitely hard to enforce wearing masks initially, but I think people have gotten so used to it and are just so excited to slowly be getting back into sporting events that people are much more likely to comply with everything. I say something that's been really interesting is actually this week we have the NCAA Division II women's basketball regional tournament, and then in 2 weeks we have the Elite Eight championship, all at the convention center. But just understanding logistics, we have limited spectators, like Rachel's saying, but even just kind of understanding like how the NCAA has certain rules when it comes to spectators can't even interact with student athletes, and there are different zones based on COVID testing. Like that's a huge thing, is just having COVID testing on site. And just planning out logistics of here's an entry point for student athletes, but here's an entry point for spectators. Here's an entry point for staff. You can't have people mingling. So I think that's been just such a huge difference. Like how many conversations we've had with health departments. Like we know Dr. Roberts really well now. So I think that has just been an interesting addition to what the whole event planning side is now, is you are now no longer just working with the fire marshals and a police department and security, you're adding the health department in there. And I think it's probably going to stay that way for a while. We're seeing like cleaning and sanitation is huge. So just kind of understanding how that plays into game times. Game times used to be 2.5 hours apart for us. This time it's 3 hours, just to allow that extra time for cleaning and everything. So I don't know if it's going to stay like this forever, but I can see it at least for the next year being part of like the protocols and policies and everything. For our staff personally, we all began working from home this time last year as well. I've enjoyed working from home now. So I think too, it'll be interesting going back to the office, but we're also understanding that we don't always have to all be in the office. And Zoom has been like a really great resource, even with meeting with clients that are from out of town. Sometimes it's much easier to do a call like this instead of having people drive in for an hour meeting. So we'll be really interested to see how it shapes the sporting events. But I think right now people are just excited to get back to some sort of sporting event.
Yeah, I'll just chime in with a few things. I think it was Brandon that mentioned that today is the anniversary. And I remember we were all down in Tampa at spring training, and we had a team dinner earlier that evening. And I remember at dinner, somebody mentioned the word pandemic. And I had heard the name before, but I had no idea what it meant. But pretty quickly I did my research and knew exactly what we're dealing with here. And we, as a regional sports network, sports being the operative word there, and all of a sudden we had no sports. So we had to be really creative. We had to find a way to continue to show value to our various constituencies, viewers, distributors, advertisers, team partners, and so forth. And, we've been at home. I've been to the office maybe 6 or 7 times in Manhattan since March, but just for, picking up things or meeting somebody. But I've been home ever since, and I've actually tried to read up on tips about managing from home, time management, staying engaged, Zoom etiquette, and also things like how not to make work all consuming being at home. I think Brandon, as you mentioned, you get up at 4:30, you roll over, and you're at the computer. And how do you carve out time? How are you able to distinguish between work time and family time at home? And it's a real challenge. And in terms of the work and working with my colleagues and everything, I have found that since the pandemic and since we've worked at home, that the lines of responsibility have blurred a little bit. And what I mean by that is I'm communications, I'm public relations, and I don't pretend to be a programmer or production or marketer, but I have found myself over the last year dabbling into some of those areas and, giving my 2 cents and lending advice. And if I have an idea, I guess I'm more apt to share it given the situation and given that we're all trying to help each other. So everybody's pitching in titles. Yes, you have titles, but there's nobody complains if somebody goes out of their lane, so to speak, because it's basically all hands on deck. And you just have to learn how to pivot, on a dime, anticipating every possible scenario, just adapting to whatever type of changes occur. And being in public relations and being in sports, we all know that it's a 24/7 job, and things happen, things change nonstop. And I think for the last year that has been accelerated, or it's been on steroids, because things aren't changing every hour, things are changing every minute. Okay, whether it's all the leagues and school conferences dropping things every 15 minutes, or it's the Black Lives Matter and all the protests and riots that we saw last summer, and seeing how the different leagues and teams and networks and media entities are reacting. It is just nonstop now, more so than ever. And then lastly, I would say, it's the entities and the individuals and the managers that fare well in this type of environment are the ones that can find a way to convert challenges into opportunities, and get over the woe is me attitude and figure out, okay, this is not going to change. This is the world we live in. How do I make the most of it? And it's been a challenge, but there have been opportunities afforded me as well. So.
I like that Eric touched on the concept of managing remotely. There was a great article in December in the Wall Street Journal about performance reviews and how do you assess somebody that's been virtual the whole time. And the conclusion of the article, and I think one of the perspectives that the Reds took is, if you're showing up and you're putting in time, we're going to commend you for that. People have lost relatives because of the pandemic. People have lost jobs. Spouses have lost jobs. And so I think being really empathetic, and those organizations that have prioritized that, if you could come out on top of this, I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I really appreciate everyone's perspective on that. So it is right around 6:15. So I want to shift now into the networking portion of this event. So I do have the breakout rooms set up, and I have it set up in the way where you can choose your own breakout room. So you'll see, I assume when I open the breakout rooms, they're each labeled with one of our panelists' names. So our guests, you can just obviously go into the room that's labeled with your name, and then students, you can choose whichever room you would like to go into to network. If you're not able to move from room to room, I believe you can come back to this main room and then move to another room, or I can just put you in a room if you want to bounce around. And I do encourage you to do that so you can connect with as many of the professionals in more of a smaller group setting as you would like to. And again, I will stay in this main room. If anyone has questions at any point, feel free to pop back here. So I'll go ahead and open these rooms, and then you're welcome to jump in.